They said she was unsinkable, the largest ship the world had ever seen, built at the height of an empire that believed itself indestructible. She was more than a vessel. She was a monument to an age, an altar of steel and steam, worshipping human progress. The Titanic set sail in April 1912, carrying the wealthiest men alive, the humblest emigrants, and the illusion that mastery over nature was complete. This is Occult Bedtime Stories. The Titanic Conspiracies. The Titanic was born in Belfast in the Harland and Wolff shipyard, a place of hard labor. No curses or dark rituals, just men and machines, riveting night and day to create the most advanced liner of its time. The builders trusted their craftsmanship absolutely. That trust became legend, the unsinkable myth that would outlive them all. Now listen closer. In the years before the Titanic sailed, a storm was brewing over money. In November of 1910, 6 influential men slipped quietly from public view. Aldrich, Andrew, Davison, Shelton, Vanderlip, and Warburg traveled under assumed purposes, a duck hunting trip, they said. In truth, they journeyed to the Jekyll Island Club, a private retreat off the coast of Georgia, owned by the wealthiest and most powerful families in America. The island itself was remote, an isolated world of manicured lawns, silent pines, and mansions called cottages. The United States had been shaken by repeated financial panics, bank runs, frozen credit, the chaos of money evaporating overnight. Publicly, these men spoke of reform and stability. Privately, they feared something deeper, that the nation's economy was too wild, too unpredictable, too free. So they met in secret. For 9 days, they worked in isolation. They called one another only by their first names, so that even servants would not recognize who was present. No notes were allowed, no records, no explanations. There, away from Congress, away from voters, and away from the world, they drafted a plan. A blueprint to reshape the nation's entire financial structure. A system that would hold the reserves of all banks. A system that could expand or contract the supply of money itself. A system that could direct the economic tides of the country from a single, central source. When they returned, the men did not speak of the gathering. Not to colleagues, not to newspapers, not even to their own families. The meeting became a rumor, a story told in side rooms and back halls. And so the plan waited, quietly, as a ship was being built in a distant harbor. By the winter of 1911, a draft for the plan existed, though few knew where it came from. In Washington, discussions began to shift. Powerful bankers grew watchful, and politicians leaned in close. The world continued, unaware. Trains moved, cities bustled, ocean liners prepared their maiden voyages. And somewhere beneath it all, a new system was already forming, not yet revealed, but inevitable. And three of the most influential skeptics, or as they were called, resistors, would soon find themselves aboard a doomed ship. John Jacob Astor IV. Astor was one of the richest men in the world, heir to a real estate empire, author, inventor, and friend to Nikola Tesla. He had publicly voiced doubts about central banking schemes and America's drift toward debt-based economics. Some researchers argue that Astor supported alternative science and energy research that would have challenged the industrial monopolies of J.P. Morgan and his associates. The same Morgan who financed the very ship Astor boarded. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, Astor helped his young pregnant wife into the lifeboat, then stepped back. His body was later found crushed. His gold watch stopped at 2:20 a.m. Benjamin Guggenheim. Guggenheim's family fortune came from mining and metals, industries heavily tied to banking interests. He had expressed distrust of the financial cabal consolidating power on Wall Street. On the Titanic, he famously dressed in evening wear as the ship sank, saying, "We are dressed in our best and prepared to go down like gentlemen." Some say that calm has been reinterpreted not as nobility, but as resignation, the last toast of a man who knew the tide had already turned. Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's and a former U.S. congressman. Straus was an advocate for sound money and had opposed the idea of a privately controlled central bank. Straus was respected in both political and business circles. A man of principle and influence who, according to speculation, could have slowed or blocked legislation establishing the Federal Reserve. He refused to board a lifeboat while others remained aboard. His wife, Ida, chose to stay beside him, saying, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." Their story became legend, but few mention his views on money and governance. The surviving financier, J.P. Morgan, the titan behind International Mercantile Marine, the corporation that owned White Star Line, was supposed to be on that voyage. He had a luxurious suite reserved, complete with a private promenade deck and a specially designed cigar holder. At the last minute, Morgan canceled his trip, citing illness, and stayed behind in France. Days later, the Titanic sank. A year after that, in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act passed, largely shaped by Morgan's circle of influence. Is it coincidence that three of the wealthiest, most independent voices opposing centralized banking perished on the most famous maritime disaster in history, while the man whose empire would benefit most survived? Most historians dismiss the connection as myth, but in the ledger of human power, accidents often arrive at opportune times. Perhaps the conspiracy goes even deeper into the timeline. 14 years before the Titanic set sail, a writer named Morgan Robertson published a novella. It told of an enormous ocean liner called the Titan, declared unsinkable, that struck an iceberg in April and went down with terrible loss of life. The ship in the story was nearly the same size as the Titanic, traveling at nearly the same speed, and lacking enough lifeboats, just like the real one. When reporters asked Robertson if he had foreseen the tragedy, he said no, that he simply knew the hubris of men and what nature does to pride. Several passengers from the Titanic reported premonitions. First-class passenger Edith Rosenbaum refused to board, then relented, but brought a toy musical pig she said would keep her safe. Steward John Coffey deserted the ship before sailing, claiming he dreamed of a disaster at sea. Dozens of others wrote of bad feelings, strange coincidences, and dreams of ice. Even with premonitions, none can change what was coming. When the Titanic sank, it carried more than 1,500 souls into the Atlantic, but it also carried something invisible, a turning point. The age of empires began to fracture. Within 2 years came the First World War. Within 3, the new banking system was established. The Titanic sunk at a turning point for mankind, the end of the old world and the beginning of a modern one. But was it a curse or a plot? Or was it a mirror reflecting what happens when belief outpaces humility? She still lies there, 2 miles down, a city of iron and silence. Every decade, the sea gives back another artifact. A clock stopped at 2:20 a.m., a pair of shoes, a letter never mailed. People dive down not just for treasure, but to understand what we once were. No matter what the truth is about what sunk the Titanic, one thing is certain: when man believes himself unsinkable, the universe replies. This has been Occult Bedtime Stories. The Titanic conspiracies. Pleasant dreams.